Steve tries to welcome me in, but when he greets me and is about to ask where Blue is when it was mealtime, intro gets interrupted. The beginning part of the mealtime song plays, and Steve comes out of the house to check on Mailbox. Steve could not believe it was mealtime already. Mailbox had a treasured delivery. Steve sits down on the path. Blue joins him as he opens the box, and inside was a small yellow treasure chest. When Steve opened the chest, a female voice was heard. Steve and Blue were in for a treasure hunt. Blue gets out the treasure map. Mailbox is amazed and asked who set up the whole treasure hunt. Steve was wondering that same thing. Blue knew who set up the treasure hunt, and that is when it was time to play Blue's Clues. Steve had to figure out how to remove the paw print. Blue holds a sparkly red cloth, and Steve uses it and cleans the paw print off the screen. Soon after, Steve had to figure out where he was going to put all that stuff he had in his hands. Blue gets out a backpack for Steve. It was a treasure hunt backpack. Steve and Blue were all set for the treasure hunt. They started by looking for hints. There was a hint in front of the house. Steve read the hint, which said, "Let's start the treasure hunt, if you will. Go inside the house. It'll be a thrill." Steve and Blue entered their own house. Immediately after that, they sat in the thinking chair so they can take a look at the treasure map. What they had to do is fill in the first space. Blue pulls out a house sticker from the backpack. It gets put into place. All Steve and Blue had to do are follow the dotted lines all the way to the X. Blue puts away the map in the backpack. Side Table asks what Steve and Blue were doing. Steve tells Side Table that he and Blue are on a big treasure hunt. Side Table says, "No way! I wonder who set up this whole treasure hunt." Steve tells her that they're going to play Blue's Clues to find the answer. Side Table gets out of the treasure hunt notebook. Now, Steve and Blue sang the introduction of how to play Blue's Clues. After that, Steve and Blue continued their treasure hunt. Steve saw another hint. It was a question that read, "What has 12 numbers and tells time?" The answer, in this case, was a clock. Steve remembered that Tickety is a clock. Steve and Blue went to see Tickety in the bedroom. Blue pulls out a picture of Tickety in the second space. They're getting a little closer to the treasure. Immediately after that, Tickety asks Steve how the treasure hunt was going. Steve tells Tickety that the treasure hunt leads them straight to her. Seconds after, a clue is found on a pair of glasses near her. Steve gets out the notebook and draws the first clue. Steve did not have enough info on who set the whole treasure hunt. They needed to keep going. As Steve was about to put his notebook away, the backside sparkled. Steve was amazed. He found a secret compartment in his own notebook. It was so tiny. Steve gave it to Blue to unroll the next hint. The third hint was an introduction. It read, "Find these 2 things and you'll see a land of great discovery." The 2 things Steve and Blue had to find was a book and a key. They find the book where the glasses were found, but now they had to find the key. They go to the kitchen, and sure enough, there was the key. Paprika was holding it. Paprika tells Steve and Blue that they cannot have the key until they solve a riddle. First part of the riddle reads, "Kangaroo starts with the letter blank." The answer is a K. The second part of the riddle reads, "Eggs start with the letter blank." The answer is an E. The third part of the riddle read, "Yo-yo starts with the letter blank." The answer is a Y. The letter Y that Steve remembers. After solving all 3 parts of the riddle, Steve reads the letters K-E-Y, which spell key. They figured out the riddle and got the key as a reward. Blue gets out a sticker showing Mr. Salt, Mrs. Pepper, and Paprika in the kitchen. Mrs. Pepper had something else for Steve and Blue. There's a picture of a bookcase. They start looking for that bookcase, but there's a clue on the rocking chair behind Steve. He gets out of the treasure hunt notebook and uses a red crayon to draw the rocking chair. Steve had 2 clues, which were glasses and a red rocking chair. Steve had to find the last clue. Steve forgot what he was supposed to do. I tell him, "The bookcase." Steve and Blue made it to the bookcase. Sparkle of light appears to show that something was missing. Steve and Blue get out of the book. Blue slides the book on the shelf. Soon after, the bookcase moves to the left. Steve and Blue were in shock. There's a secret passageway. Steve was speechless. He tries turning the knob. It was locked. Blue gets out the key, and after that, the little door opens. Steve and Blue skidoo into the land of great discovery. They slide down a rainbow and land in a pot of gold. Steve discovered that he had a piece of chocolate inside a gold wrapper. Blue added the sticker to show the land of great discovery. They were getting closer and closer. Soon after, Steve had a picture of a nursery rhyme character on the wrapper. It was a picture of Little Miss Muffet. It was Blue's favorite nursery rhyme. Steve and Blue go to Little Miss Muffet, who had a problem with her story. Blue says hi to Little Miss Muffet. She was so glad someone showed up. So far, the story goes, Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet eating curds and whey. And then along came a blank. Steve and Blue had to figure out what happened next in the Little Miss Muffet story. There was a bug, a spider, and a caterpillar to choose from. The answer was a spider. The rest of the story was, along came a spider who sat down beside her and frightened Miss Muffet away. The spider did just that and had a picture of Jack be Nimble. After doing so, the spider gave them the next hint, which led them to Jack be Nimble. Jack jumps past Steve and Blue as their cue from Little Miss Muffet led them to him. They looked for him in Jill's well on the left, and in the giant's beanstalk on the right, but couldn't find him. Jack appears and has a problem. Nursery rhyme starts with, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick. Steve and Blue had to figure out what Jack had to jump over. On a tree stump there was a lamp, a candlestick, and Jill's pail of water to choose from. The answer was a candlestick. The whole nursery rhyme is, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jump over the candlestick. Jack had a scroll for Steve and Blue to thank him for his help. Steve picks up the scroll, and it reads, You've come so far, the end is near, now blank, but this time Steve hits a snag. The message was incomplete, as he knows the bottom half of the scroll was recently torn off. How's Steve supposed to figure out what the whole message was if there was a part of the scroll missing? Steve saw a tree that grew green striped things. He also found a clue on a green striped dress growing on the tree. Steve gets out the notebook and draws the third clue with a green striped crayon from a bush. After drawing the third clue, Steve and Blue had to skidoo out of the land of great discovery to go home and sit in the thinking chair to put all three clues together. The clues were glasses, a rocking chair, and a green striped things. He also found a clue on a green striped dress. Steve had to figure out who set up the whole treasure hunt that has glasses, sits in a rocking chair, and wears a green striped dress. The answer was Steve's grandma. He was amazed. His grandma had glasses and sits in a rocking thinking chair and wears green stripes. Steve realized that his grandma set up this whole treasure hunt. Steve and Blue sang the tune We Sat On Down instead of their usual tune of how they figured out Blue's clues. After that, a scroll was on the thinking chair. Steve returns to sit on the thinking chair. Steve thinks that it was the other half from the last hint. Steve reads the message where it is complete now. The whole message read, You've come so far. The end is near. Now you are here. Steve and Blue ask what room they were in. I tell them the living room. So Blue puts a sticker showing a picture of the thinking chair in the living room onto the map. All they have left to do is find the X. Steve and Blue searched all over trying to find the X. Sure enough, the X was on mailbox. Steve and Blue head outside and found out that mailbox was holding the treasure. Steve pulls out the red treasure chest. He opens it and a heart plays. Inside were presents. There were for Blue and for Steve. There was a card in there too. Steve read the card that said, Turn around and you will see. I'm sitting right behind the tree. Steve's grandma appears and hugs her grandson. Steve thought it was the coolest treasure hunt ever, so Blue takes her to open her present, which is a key. Steve opens his present, and inside was banana cookies. Steve thought it was a day to remember. Steve sings a so long song.